Over the past year, I gained over 66 new coaster credits over 7 new parks in the year of 2022. It was an amazing year. I doubled my coaster count all the way up to 130. There were some rides that blew my expectations and met those and went even higher, and there's some coasters that went even lower and were very disappointing. And I'm going to talk about those today. I have 7 coasters on my list that absolutely blew my mind, were better than expected, or just met expectations to a higher level. And I also have 5 that were disappointing and did not meet my expectations, what I had for the ride before I went into it. If you don't know me, I'm Austin from the Park Hoppers Radio. This is our first produced video that we're going to be having on the channel, and a lot more to come from this. My buddy and I mainly run our Park Hoppers Radio, which is a podcast all about the amusement park and theme park industry. And we talk about roller coasters, we talk with park officials, rankings, and bringing people from all around the community to talk about that on our podcast. It's on Apple Play, Google, and Spotify. So if you want to check that out, please consider following that, liking this page, subscribing, and then also following our podcast and listening to that, where we post mainly, and then on Instagram and TikTok at the same handle. But before we get started with today's video, I want to give 4 special shout outs to our Patreon subscribers. So number 1 is our Diamond tier subscriber, which is Jackson, which is our executive producer for our podcast at the highest level possible for Patreon. So thank you so much, Jackson, for all your support that you have for this channel and the love that you give us. So thank you so mumuch. The 2 people that are in our Platinum tier at the second highest level are Garen and Caleb. So thank you guys so much also for your support. Everybody that subscribes, the support for this channel and the podcast that we've received over the past year just starting has been incredible, so thank you guys. And then at our gold tier, we have Joe, one of our favorite subscribers, one of our favorite listeners, and interacts with our content so much. So thank you, Joe, and everybody else that is on our Patreon. So Joe, Caleb, Garrett, and Jackson, we couldn't do it without you guys and everybody else that listens to the podcast. So thank you guys. So click your seatbelts in and ride on, because we're going to talk about my 5 most disappointing credits I got this year and 7 best new credits that I got this year. So we're going to talk about those now, coming up. Coming in at number 7 for the best credit that I got this year, at the number 7 spot, is Intimidator 305. So at the 7th spot, it's considered one of the world's most intense roller coasters, and it lived up to its name. Riding Fury a mere 18 hours before this, they are polar opposites in a great way. From the 305-foot drop all the way to the low-to-the-ground turn, and then coming up to that second hill, it really did make me gray out front and back row, but back row a lot more. But the rest of the layout is just Maverick on steroids, but I still like Maverick a little bit better. But after looking back on it the rest of my year, it's probably my top 20 and was great with not even a station wait. Personally, it is on the bottom 4 of my Giga coasters. Coming at the 5th spot for one of the most disappointing credits I got this year, but at the 5th spot, so not that disappointing, was Skyrocket at Kennywood. Visiting Kennywood for the first time opening weekend, I came in expecting an airtime-filled machine that was hyped up from many videos, comments, and many people around the community talking about this ride with the launch and the airtime moments on the hill, the corkscrew, and various other elements. But this was not a very powerful launch, and the trim brakes on top of the hill really killed the momentum. Not to mention that the corkscrew was one of the best elements on the ride, probably the best, but overall I didn't feel the intensity and the out of my seat sensation and airtime that comes with it. But it kind of meanders through the second half of the ride, and overall it kind of was just pretty mid. But I'm not saying this is a bad ride. Like I said, it's a number 5 spot, not the most disappointing credit, because I kind of had my expectations but didn't from the hyped up that I got in the community. But overall, it's just okay. It's not the best ride in the park, and it's at the lower half of the park. That's the number 5 spot. Coming at the number 6 spot for one of the best credits I got this year is Manta at SeaWorld Orlando. Manta, I came in with high expectations and got off with the expectations met even higher. This ride, from the queue line to the station to the foliage and everything around this ride, is just one perfect ride all together in one bundle. Not to mention that this is the best flying coaster I've been on, not including Tatsu, as I haven't rode it yet. But overall, this coaster, from seamless transitions into the inversions and everything else, is just so butter smooth. And not to mention the iconic splashdown, or whatever you want to call it at the end, with the water effect coming out. But this ride is in my top 20, and obviously, like I said, it is my top flying coaster. Coming out of the 4th spot for one of the most disappointing credits I got this year was XFlight at Six Flags Great America. I didn't have a lot of expectations coming into this ride before I did this, because I didn't know I was actually going on this trip. But I knew it was a small, compact wing coaster, and not the size of Gatekeeper, but small, compact, and it was very forceful. Let me put you in my seat really quick. So I got on this ride and I was stapled to Beyond Bolivian, and it was to the point where it was like uncomfortable to breathe. And going up the lift hill, I couldn't really do anything about it after this. And I'm not saying this ride is a bad ride by any means, but I'll definitely need a re-ride. So I was stapled and it just kept getting tighter the entire ride. I had a wing seat in the middle row, and it was kind of bouncy and uncomfortable with the B&M kind of a little bit of rattle. And overall, the best part of the ride was the near miss elements, which were spectacular. But overall, I think I just need a re-ride. I'm not saying the ride is bad, but like I said, just need a re-ride and maybe it'll move up in my rankings next year. Coming in at my 5th best credit I got this year is Jersey Devil Coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure. I could have said 4 coasters from this park, but I kept it to 2. Jersey Devil at the first ride would have been on the disappointing side, but after getting 11 rides on this and then getting on the ride with a full train in the heat, going into the sunset, this ride absolutely changed my mind. It was hauling, snappy, forceful, and everything I expected out of a single rail. Getting this ride with a full train, like I said, going into the sunset and in the back row, you get pulled like a mother over that first hill in the back row and makes this drop in one of my top 10 first drops. So it's an amazing ride overall, a great snappy single rail. And I understand the criticisms of it, but it's my first single rail and only single rail I've been on. So I'm going to keep it at this number 5 spot for one of the best credits I got this year in 2022. Coming at the number 3 spot for one of the most disappointing credits that did not live up to the hype is Icebreaker at SeaWorld Orlando. I came in riding with high hopes and they were hyped up, and this was hyped up by some very close friends in the community, and it fell so short. Yes, it's a mix of a family ride in air quotes, but not with the height requirements. So I pushed that aside and took into account everything overall, and I was still left disappointed by this ride. I rode this 3 separate times in 3 different rows, so middle, front, and back. And personally, I didn't experience the insane airtime that everybody was talking about. That was due in part to the restraints that we had because I'm a taller guy. But I just did not personally experience the airtime. And honestly, I would rather ride any other ride in this park, minus the kiddie ride. I think Infinity Falls is a better ride overall than Icebreaker. And the coaster opening up in 2023 at this park might be the next Icebreaker. Just saying. At the number 4 best credit I got this year, sticking with the same park as the last one, we stick with El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. It may be shocking to have in this spot, but I'm going to keep it at 4 because it kind of falls off in the second half of the ride, due in part to a few weeks later the incident happened with the tracking and then the potholes. But overall, it was a spectacular first half with the best drop I've ever been on in my entire life. Which also made this ride a lot special is with my dad and Jameer, one of the friends of the podcast. We got my 100th ride and my 100th credit, so it was an overall amazing ride. And back row, like I said, you get pulled down this hill with the forces of everything you have. Like all gravity, 100 tons coming down this hill. It is the best first drop I've ever been on. Like I said, it stays at the 4 spot simply due in fact because the roughness of the potholes mixed with, like I said, a few weeks later it was shut down for the rest of the year. But the first half of this ride with the camelbacks and the airtime that is with those camelbacks and then being pulled back down with all the forces of everything in the world just make the first half one of the best first halves, if not the best first half of any coaster I've ever been on. Where it falls short in the second half absolutely makes up in the first half. So this is one of my favorite rides. It's in my top 20, and it could go up depending on how they fix this ride if Six Flags intends to put the money in and work that is needed to fix El Toro. But that is my number 4 best credit I've got in 2022. Coming in, these next 2 for the worst ones are not hyped up at all. They are just overall bad, terrible, unbearable rides. And this is Mindblower at Fun Spot in Orlando. Before getting on this ride, I didn't know what to expect. I just expected maybe a little bit rough ride, but getting off this ride completely changed my mind. This is one of the worst credits. It's in the bottom half of all my credits combined out of 130. It's in probably number 125th spot. The only bearable part of this was the lift and somewhat of the first drop. The inversion was painful, headbanging, and the rest of the ride was just completely unbearable. My co-host and I both got off this ride with a headache. He very rarely gets headaches, and I never get sick on roller coasters. And I got sick after the ride. I don't know if it was the food or the ride, but the inversion, like I said, it was okay, but the rest of the ride was completely unbearable. And later came out that this ride has some structural problems with the supports, the track, but we got a zen ride. I wonder why, but I have nothing else to say about Mindblower. Like I said, it is one of the most rough and painful rides I've ever been on. That is Mindblower at Fun Spot, Orlando. The only Disney parks to make this list is Guardians of the Galaxy at Epcot. Disney absolutely did a perfect job of this ride, from the outside queue, the ride, the show elements, and everything overall combined with this ride. It really shows that they put $500 million into this ride, and it was $500 million well spent. I came in with high expectations, expecting it to be in my top 30, and I was still left surprised. Due to Disney's ride reservation system, we only had one ride on this, but ended up getting back row, which is front row for the launch. Like I said, from the outside plaza, the queue line, the show elements, the backwards launch into the Cosmic Rewind, and the story in the show elements, this ride is one of the best overall rides I've ever been on. It's not a forceful ride by any means, but it really is butter smooth, and it's almost a mile-long layout, and you really feel like you're floating through space the entire time with the Guardians alongside you. Pair this with the on-ride audio and the music that you get with it makes it just one perfect ride that Disney has made. It's not the best Disney roller coaster, but it's second best. Disney and Epcot, you guys did an amazing job with Guardians of the Galaxy. Now you just need to finish the rest of Epcot. And coming in with no surprise, if anybody knows me from the Park Hoppers Radio, the podcast, and our Instagram page we run, we know that Green Lantern is the worst ride and the worst credit I got in 2022. This ride was so bad, in fact, that I was praying the entire ride as a Christian man for this ride to end. And this ride is number 130 out of 130 for the worst rides I've ever been on. It's became a meme on the Instagram page, and there's even a Green Lantern stand page made about this ride because of how much I hate it, but so much of my friends love it, which I don't understand. Hands down the worst B&M model they've ever made. During this ride, I was praying for it then. Like I said, I have a huge headache after. I got middle row. I was seated fine with comfortability, obviously with the standing element, but it was a headbanging machine from beginning to end. From the first drop, every inversion, transition, and everything was janky and uncomfortable. I would love to see them take this out in the future, and it's a big plot of land. And I could definitely see for the 50th anniversary them getting a dive coaster in this plot. Let me know what you think about that. If this prediction comes true, I won't be surprised, but I could definitely see a dive coaster going in this plot like Dr. Diabolical's theming over here. But I would love to see a new addition and this removed from the park. But that is the worst credit I ever got and will probably ever get, is Green Lantern at Six Flags Great Adventure. Coming in at the second best credit in one of my favorite coasters I've ever been on is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. It's the second best credit I got in later this year in my Orlando trip. I had very high expectations, obviously, because it's people's one or two in their rankings. So they were absolutely met and even more. And like I said, it's considered as many people's top one or two, and Gwazi definitely lived up to his name. RMC converted this, and they are a masterclass in coaster manufacturing, and they converted this from the former dueling Gwazi into this monster of a coaster. This Hyper Hybrid is something special, with the drop being in my top 5 for top 5 drops of all time, and my co-host's favorite drop that he's ever been on. With the many airtime moments, the outer bank turns, the wave turn, and the best moment on the coaster being the death roll, this coaster is absolutely one of my favorite coasters I've ever been on. The death roll, like I said, is the best element I've ever been on in my life, hands down. But the second half of this ride keeps it at the number 2 spot because it is not perfect. The second half kind of falls off, and I could like to see another element in the second half. It definitely feels like something was missing from the second half, but overall, this ride is in my top 5, and like I said, it is a near perfect coaster, but the number 1 spot is a perfect coaster with no flaws, and I think it is personally one of the best coasters in the entire country. So we're going to come up to the number 1 spot, but that was number 2, Iron Gwazi. And if you're a fan of the podcast, you already know this was coming at the number 1 spot. As coming from the live stream, as everybody's already talking about it, is Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. Yes, it may be a surprising pick for some, but for some, they understand. I think this ride is a truly perfect coaster, even on opening weekend when I had one ride on it. I had no other rides in the weekend, in the cold. Like I said, getting one ride. And this is another masterclass creation in RMC. RMC converted the old and just overall boring hurler into this right-only turn masterpiece in Twisted Timbers. It has amazing theming around the area, but another Timbers in the Cedar Fair chain has better theming. Wink, wink. From the barrel roll in the first drop to the pacing on this ride that doesn't let up through the entire 20 airtime moments, 3 overbank turns, and a couple inversions, this coaster from drop to brake run, I was smiling ear to ear, and it just proves that bigger always isn't better. Twisted Timbers may not stand over 200 feet tall, have the most inversions, or the best elements, but overall this is a masterclass by RMC, and I consider this to be one of the most underrated RMCs out there. I can't even imagine what this ride is like with a full train during the summer heat, and like I said, I rode this opening weekend in the cold, in the rain. So if that is the best that it gave me that time, I can't even imagine what it is in the summer. But that is the best credit I got for the season of 2022 and the 66 new credits I got over 7 new theme parks. That was my rankings from the best and worst credits I got for the 2022 season. If you want to support the channel even more, just give it a subscribe and also check out our podcast. So link in the bio to listen to our podcast all about amusement parks and roller coasters. But if you want to support us, like I said, like and subscribe to this and check out the rest of our content across many social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram. And like I said, if you want to support us on Patreon, that is one of the extra ways you can support us too. So check out that. Have a great day. And like I always said, ride on.